inside the recording studio. I am Jody Whitesides, and with me, as always, is Mr. Chris Hellstrom. How are you today, Chris? Are you feeling sunny and warm?
Yes, I am.
Good for you.
Yeah, no, it's a nice day here in sunny Southern California. And,
Lovely.
Yeah, no, I'm feeling good. How about yourself?
Sweet. I'm feeling like a whole new man.
Yeah?
Yes.
Share.
Well, as you can see, I have no hat on today. And in addition to that, I've got custom-made jeans adorning my lower half, which is never actually seen on the broadcast of the podcast. So, yes.
But you're
like
feeling good about yourself is what you're saying.
Yes, of course.
Good.
So
awesome.
Yeah. It's always good to feel about yourself.
Absolutely.
I didn't say that right, but we'll roll with it.
Yeah. We're treading lightly here early on, so yeah.
Of course.
No, it's cool. Have you had an interesting week?
Yes and no.
Okay.
I don't know if it's necessarily something we need to delve in too much, but yeah.
Then let's not.
Right.
Yeah.
No, actually, I did text you yesterday to ask you a question of, have you ever gone back on something you've written and realized that, yeah, it's clever, but it was also extremely hard to pull off? And you did say yes.
Yeah. Well, but now that you bring that up, I am reminded of a situation that was actually the first band that I was in. And we're talking, mid-teens here. Yeah. And me and the other guitar players, it was two guitar players.
Were you in Hammerfall?
No, but I used to room with a guy that was in Hammerfall. Yeah, one of my good friends, Stefan.
Nice.
Yeah, but we were the primary songwriters, and as young guitar players do, our goal was to write stuff that the other guitar player was not able to play.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about right there.
Yeah. So, I mean, terribly immature, but it did raise at least my playing game. So that was because he had, weaknesses that I didn't, and vice versa, right?
Sweet.
So, oh shit, I really need to work on this. So I guess that's the closest I've come to that. But you tended to write a little bit more of the proggier stuff.
Good God, did I ever?
Yeah,
it was awesome. And going through right now, transcribing this stuff to make available on social media and whatnot. It's. Yeah, I'm questioning why did I do this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
yeah, no, I can. I've had the experience where I've had writing sessions. I was like all of us do, right? We have ideas of samples of songs and things like that. We started at one point, and I've tried to revisit and go back and go. And I figured, how the hell did I play that? And you find yourself in the weird situation where you're sitting there transcribing something that you wrote, not in the too distant past, right?
Yes.
It's an odd feeling,
Well, but
yeah,
as I mentioned, I'm doing that, and I'm finding that it's actually coming back to me, and that's probably just from the sheer amount of practice that I put into writing the stuff and being able to play it without looking at my hands while performing. Yeah. And it's the kind of stuff that most people would be like, damn, I wouldn't be able to look away from my hands if I was doing this. And it's like, yeah, but I wanted to be able to connect to the audience. So I practiced this shit incessantly. So,
yeah,
but trying to transcribe some of the stuff is just like, what the hell was I thinking? Cause to talk about it theoretically, it's like, whoa, this is just awful, cause it makes it complicated. And it's nuts. And it's like, and it takes the transcription time level from maybe only taking an hour or so to taking 4 to 5 hours on a single song. So but there was one key word that you said in all of that in not too long ago. You said something about sample, and that's what our today's topic is pretty much about. Not sampling songs, but sample rates. So why don't we switch gears and get right into that now that we've wasted several minutes of people's times?
Yeah. No, sample rates is one of those things that can be perhaps a little bit confusing, what you should be using and everything when you're starting out. And I would venture to say, and we'll go into this a little bit more later on, that it's a little bit dependent on what it is that you're doing. But I suppose we should first talk about what is a sample rate.
So and define it for us, will ya?
Well, it is essentially a measurement of taking incoming audio and digitizing it. Mm-hmm. And it does this by taking, well, as we're doing the entire audio spectrum as based on human hearing, which is 20 hertz to 20K. Nobody really hears 20K, but that's besides the point. That's what we're going with.
And by 20 hertz, you're probably more or less feeling it more than you are hearing it so much. But yeah.
Yeah, and good luck dealing with those subsonics there in your room as well, right? But but so we're taking two measurements, a positive and a negative, per each wave, I suppose.
Each and we're slice going up of sound.
Each slice of sound, a positive and a negative, we get a measurement. And that would equal up to 40,000. You know, if we're recording up to 20K, that would be 40,000 samples.
Okay, why is that?
Well, because 20 times 2 is 40.
Yeah, but you didn't actually define any of that. I know that we were briefly talking about it before we hit record right now, but you didn't mention the reasoning behind that as you're explaining it now.
Okay, yeah, let me try to explain this a little bit better. We are taking, let's think of it as snapshots in the span of a second. And in the span of that second, we are going to have X amount of snapshots, which equal our sample rate.
Right.
So if we take the first, the lowest that we tend to have, like this sort of like what they have on CDs and things, is 44.1.
Which equals 44,100 samples per second. But the key thing that I was hoping that you would key onto that you mentioned earlier is what is known as Nyquist theorem.
The Nyquist theorem,
yes.
Yeah. So, and that's the highest frequency we can record is half of the sample rate. So the question that comes up then is like, well, why don't we just have a sample rate of 40, like 40K? Why is
40,
it 44?
000, yeah.
40,000. Yeah. I suppose I should stop saying K and saying 40,000.
Well, you said 40 and that would be like, well, that's not very many samples per second right there.
I'm sorry. Yeah, but it has to do with we are the converters they're doing this for us is adding a filter on the top end of the spectrum.
Yes.
And to compensate for possible rounding errors and things of that nature in the higher end, the sound or the frequency rate is extended up to 22.05 to accommodate for that. And that's how we end up twice of that becomes 44.
Right. And that's just for everybody out there. That means there's a lot of complicated math going on behind the scenes.
Yes. A lot, right? But that's basically what a sample rate. We're taking these incredible amounts of snapshots of the audio coming in, and at the rate that happens, I suppose you can look at that's the sample rate.
Right, and so the number of samples per second for most things, especially in the era of CDs when digital first came onto the scene, it was 44,100 samples per second. And as you were stating a little bit earlier, there is a positive side and a negative side, which means you've got a line that's 0 in the middle and you've got a plus on one side and the negative on the going down on the other side to take a complete picture of what's happening at any microsecond that's happening in the sound. Now, you also mentioned that early converters had filters.
Yeah.
And I know that on a previous podcast episode of ours, and I can't remember right off the top of my head, but I do remember talking about it. We did discuss the early converters of the ADAT system. Which was highly popular as an early digital recording system. The funny thing is that if you owned one of these, or maybe you still do, you could put your audio that you recorded on a spectrometer, and you would see that there would be nothing above 16K. Literally a gigantic cliff. You'd have sound and audio going up to 16K, and then poof, nothing further beyond that. Their converters were actually really cheap by the era's standard. Mm-hmm. And so to hide that cheapness, they cut it off pretty low, so to speak.
Yeah.
But by today's standards, we don't have that issue anymore.
Right. But I think that by doing that, they made they made the ADAT cost effective. Like people could actually afford them and do that kind of thing. Yeah. So, but it is important to remember just how much better these converters are today. We've all had crappy interfaces in the past.
Well, not so much anymore. I mean, if you're getting into the game now, you don't have that problem, or you don't have as much of a problem, I should say. I'm sure that there are still companies using not so good converters, and maybe if you put them on a spectrometer and you ran a sine wave through it, you could find out where it is actually cutting off or filtering off the signal, so to speak. But it was heavily prevalent early on in the digital revolution, so to speak. So
limitation of technology. So
but we've moved beyond that now.
Absolutely, we certainly have. So maybe we should mention just the most common sample rates that we use. We mentioned 44.1.
Yes. And the reason for that one was strictly because that's what CDs were manufactured to be at.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, presumably because of the limitation at the time. But any CD that you still buy today is 44.1.
But do you remember the SACD and DSD?
No.
Okay. I don't know if I want to jump too far into that, but the SACD was a high resolution CD and had a higher sample rate. And DSD, which was, I think, digital streaming something or other by Sony, was even weirder because I think the sample rate was lower, but the amount of what it did in the amount of same time was actually more than 44.1. And so it was supposed to sound better. But of course, like the whole VHS versus Betamax thing, which is the precursor to streaming and DVDs, that fight was won by the lesser quality.
It's almost one of those like first to market that grabs on that's the...
Or whoever's more ruthless in business.
or that, yeah. But stepping up from 44.1, we have 48.
48,000 samples.
Which is what I tend to use most of the time, if you care to know that. We go up, and now we have 88.2, which is, of course, twice 44.1.
Which should make it twice as good, right?
Definitely. Well, no. Well, that's, I don't come across many people today that use that sample rate.
I think that never even heard
it's
of
there.
People using it. I know it's there. I've just never heard of anyone actually using that one.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
I would say that, the big one is coming up after that. That would be 96K, right?
Yes.
Which is twice of 48. There is a sample rate of 176.4, which is, again, 3 times.
Oh, no. 4 times. It's double the 88. So it's 4 times the 44.1, not 3 times 4.
Right. Did I say 3 times?
Yes.
Okay, no, it's 4 times. Yeah.
You're
no,
correct
I'm sorry.
now.
I was thinking of the Swedish 4.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with Swedish 4 yet.
No, that's just the excuse you use when you say something stupid.
Okay.
And then, of course, 192.
Right, which is double 96 and 4 times 48.
There you go. So, but I would say the big 3, as it were, the most common, I would say, would 44.1, 48, and 96.
Yes.
So
Why would you choose one over the other? That's the first question I'd ask.
Yeah. The way I got, well, when I started out, my systems couldn't handle really anything more than 44.1.
Yes.
So that was sort of like the de facto thing, right? You work with the best that you have. There is a trade-off. More processing power, less of an issue, but disk space, being less of an issue with that. But when I started doing things that were geared for video or library stuff, that kind of thing, that they wanted 48.
Yes.
There's
a good reason for that.
Yeah.
Because all the video editors actually use 48K, 48,000 sample rate as the de facto standard of video editing. Who knows why? They just did it that way.
Right. And just like, CDs were at 44.1, that's just one of those things. That's the factory standard. So you end up using 48K.
Yep.
So that's how I ended up with that. I know that you are a fan of working in 96 whenever you can.
Yes, that I am.
So what's your reasoning for that?
Well, it goes back to that.
Like that?
It has more to do with that old statement of more is more and more is better, right?
Right.
Part of it is that I've been fortunate to generally have very capable machines in my arsenal.
Mm-hmm.
So early on, when 96 was more like what 192 might be today, I had a machine that could do 96K. I had an audio interface that was capable of doing it. And I decided to just try it out and play something that was recorded at 44.1 and also at 96K, because it was before I jumped into the whole 48K thing as well. So
Gotcha.
Like you doing a bunch of stuff for production work, you do it at the sample rate that it's required in, and then you don't have to do any conversion. You just do your stuff and you mix and you go and you deliver it in the same sample rate they want. So
yeah.
But with 96K, and I generally tend to do 96K only with artists, whether it's my own artist material or I'm producing another artist, and it's meant for something that's going out into the world that is also to my my desire to want to future proof type thing.
Yeah.
And so the more is more thing kept kind of going through my head. And I would have multiple people telling me, dude, you don't do that at 96K. Your computer's not going to be able to handle it. You're not going to be able to do this. But as you said, your machine can only handle so much back in the day. And at 44.1, if you had a lesser machine, you were freezing tracks. So at 96K, I was already used to kind of, if I needed to, freezing tracks. Unfortunately, my machine didn't have to do that all the time because I had a fairly capable machine, and it was before I got really ridiculous into super complex mixes. But I would try it out. And then I ended up recording an entire album at 96K. And I remember one person very much in particular was like, don't do that. That's just not a good idea. And of course, the interesting thing is I chose him to master that album. And the interesting thing that happened is that I did have one holdover track that I had recorded prior to making the decision to record the rest of the album at 96K. And then I had the one track that was recorded at, I want to say it was recorded at 44.1, but without digging back into the archives and pulling out the files, I really don't know. So he goes to master it. And he, after giving me all that grief and all that garbage about don't do it, you're just setting yourself up for disappointment. It's not worth it. It's not going to make any difference. In the middle of mastering the record, he contacts me and says, I was wrong. I can hear the difference between the track that wasn't recorded at 96K and the rest that were. So I also, because I was experimenting and going back and forth, I could hear that difference. It's subtle, but it's there. It's the same concept that they had at one point. I remember there was like a tape test, and I think it was with Maxell tape or something like that. And they wanted to do an A/B against, is it real on a tape or is it an MP3? And they would do the side by side. And most people, they were getting it right and wrong at 50%, which means they couldn't hear the difference. Right. But I remember taking that test and I nailed it like 99%. And if you knew what to listen for in the audio that was being played back for you, you could tell the difference between what was one format and what was another in terms of an MP3 compared to even just, say, a cassette tape.
Yeah.
So for whatever reason, with 96K, it started, I could actually like feel a bit more depth in what was going on. And this is when 16-bit and 24-bit were fighting it out. Now you're fighting it out with like 24-bit, 32, or even possibly 64-bit. I think there's some companies doing that now. The bit depth makes, I think, a much bigger difference in terms of the smoothness of the tail of the sound. But the amount of clarity and depth that you get in the bigness of the sound comes from the sample rate, I think.
Yeah.
So it kind of works as a twofold thing. And I know we're just talking about sample rate today. So I started working primarily, like I said, with artist material for 96K. And the biggest reason for that was future-proofing the audio, because if you ever wanted to pull it back out and do a remix or whatever, obviously in the future, sample rates are going to go up because the technology is getting better and the computers are getting faster and stronger. So that was the biggest thing, is I wanted to future-proof the ability to come back and revisit something.
Right. Well, so you heard a difference there, and you felt that it gave something to your music that your computer could handle. So then there was no drawback for you doing that.
Right.
But you said something in there. You said sample rates are going to go up.
I think so.
Well, I'm not sure I agree with that, because I think, and the reason for that is because the human hearing limit is not going to change.
Well, no. Okay.
But no, I know, but here's my argument for it. I mean, it might, not the human hearing, but but the sample rate. But what I think is more likely to happen is that the converters are going to continue to get better.
Right.
So there will be less and less artifacts. So I think that there's probably not going to be any actual need to go beyond 192 or even 96.
Well, maybe not.
Depending on what. So, I mean,
but even now, 192 is difficult to kind of work with. I have, a very, very capable machine and very capable audio interfaces. But when I try out 192 now, it's the kind of thing where 3 or 4 tracks of that, and it's bringing my setup to its knees.
Yeah.
It's a huge sample rate. And so I'm just now playing around with it because of some stuff that I'm recording. And I did a comparison, 96K to the 192. And it's a subtle difference. But it's one of those subtle differences where it's like, that makes a difference enough that I want to do this. And I'm literally doing like a guitar and vocal kind of thing for this recording setup that I'm testing it out with. And that's the only reason why, because I know I'm not going to need a lot of tracks to do it. Yeah.
And I think that is something to consider as well when choosing the sample rate. I would say, if you're not really comfortable with this, or depending on what you're doing musical style, I would say stick to 48 and you're good right there in the middle.
Sure.
Now, should you go over? Well, that's just a personal thing, right? And I also think that it depends a little bit also on what type of music that you're doing, that you're performing and writing. And
and that can make an actual big difference. I agree with you on that statement.
Yeah, so I would say that generally the more sparse your music and full of detail that you're going to have, the better off you are with a higher sample rate. And what I mean by that is if you're recording, let's say, a quartet of classical string players, you're going to have a dynamic range and you're going to have such detail that you might be more likely to hear differences up in the air and all this kind of thing. If you're doing like a just hard-hitting, slamming industrial rock track, you probably don't need to do that in 192, because it's not about those subtleties, right? It's just slamming. So less of a benefit there. And you know.
Yeah, I think sample rates are kind of program dependent upon the number of instrumentations that you have and obviously the power of the machine too. And I agree that when you're starting to work with like dense situations with tons of instruments and loud distortion and other things like that, you don't need to go I'd actually say you wouldn't really need to go on beyond 48K.
Yeah. So, yeah. And, that being said, if you have a system where you're powerful enough that you can comfortably run 96K, there's no drawback to that. You're just going to have to downsample it to whatever outlet that's being directed to. So.
Yes. Yes.
All right. So, last thing before we maybe do a little word for our sponsors here is with a higher sample rate as well. And this is an analogy that I've heard used before. If we imagine like it's a little bit apples and oranges, but it's a similar principle. When we're working with digital images, the more pixels that we have to work with, we generally get a better result in the end.
Sure.
Right? Even though it might get downsampled. I would say the same thing could be true for sample rates. Even though it's not an accurate description, but there, like you said, more is more. You have more information to work with. And some plugin manufacturers also claim that their plugins work better, and users have said too, they sound better or they perform better at higher sample rates, such as like 96K.
Yes.
Now, I can't confirm that. I haven't heard that myself, but...
Well, there's a few manufacturers of plugins that actually state this kind of thing, and Melodyne being one of them. And UA actually has a tendency to do this as well. They will upsample their math, I guess is the best way to say it. They upsample their math to work at a higher sample rate and then re-downsample it when it comes back out. And of course, all this is going on in an instantaneous fashion with the speed of the technology. But yeah.
Yeah, it's the same thing with all the Slate stuff. There's an oversampling option for the processing of the, and I wonder if this is something that is more beneficial to analog emulation type of stuff where there's a lot of math going on in the background. I'm not sure, but it's just a speculation. But it's interesting. But that's another point to consider, I suppose.
But of course. And with that, we will take a quick word from our sponsors. All right. And we're back. We're looking at the drawbacks of having higher sample rates, Chris.
Yeah. Well, the big one is what we mentioned already. It can really, really tax your system. Now, I think 44.1 to 48, probably less so. But there is a big jump going up to 96 and certainly up to 192.
Yes.
Storage is less of an issue these days.
Do you remember the days of 40 gig hard drives?
I have. If you humor me, I remember at one point when I was upgrading my system, and I remember choosing between the Mac that had a 4 or a 6 gigabyte hard drive. And I remember buying the 6 gig one and thinking, I will never have to buy another hard drive.
Famous last words.
Exactly. Now there's, you got more memory in my watch, Right. But the audio files balloon. The higher the sample rate. I'm not sure if is the comparatively to 44.1, is 96 4 times larger?
Well, part of the issue that you have to think about too is the bit depth. The bit depth also changes that quite a bit. And although the sample rate is probably a bigger deal to it, the bit depth does make a difference. And that being said, yes, from 48 to 96, it is a doubling of the file size if you keep the same bit depth.
Yeah. So I mean, they get, they can get potentially huge, which is, less of a storage issue, but again, taxing on the system if you're streaming all these from the drive. Probably easier today with an SSD drives and things, but it is very, very taxing on the system. The important thing, or if you take nothing else away from this podcast, is
this episode.
Certainly this episode is don't mix your sample rates in a project.
Yeah, what? That should have been right at the top of the whole thing before you even get started. Pick the sample rate first.
Yeah, and make sure that if you are collaborating with other people on the same project, make sure they use the same sample rate.
Yes, very important things.
Because that's something, I mean, you see that on user forums and things. I get my files back from somebody and they don't fit the time. They're sped up or they're slowed down. Yeah, that's the calling card of using the wrong sample rate.
You know what else is actually, and just to throw this in the middle, MP3s absolutely suck for this. Because, and the only reason why I say this is I do have a friend who comes to me for recording help from time to time. And more often than not, it has to do with the fact that she's being sent MP3s to record to. And MP3s have a double problem. One, what sample rate were they actually originally doing this? Because she recently came to me and said, hey, they're saying that the audio is not lining up. And I go and I look at her file and it's fine in terms of like where she's lining up, and she's starting from bar 1 and recording straight through as she's doing it, as she tends to do for her type of sessions. But then I look and I see that the file type she's been sent is an MP3.
Yeah.
And it's like, so she's guessing at what sample rate she's supposed to be recording at. So that doesn't help. So it's wasting her time, and it's wasting the person's time that's asking her to perform on said track. So communication's a big thing, but if you're recording with someone else, don't send them MP3s. Even if you do and you tell them the right sample rate, there's timing discrepancies that happen in MP3s that don't happen in WAV and AVE files. And you just don't chance your shit to that.
Well,
that's the biggest thing I would say in that. So know the sample rate that you're collaborating with so that you're transferring files appropriately. That's a big one. Don't use MP3s. That's just a guideline. It's not necessarily a hard, fast rule, but I would strongly suggest don't use MP3s.
Yeah, because I mean, today it's, I don't want to get on my high horse here, but that's a little bit of a laziness thing too. Because thanks. Because with the services that we have today, like you and I, there's so many ways to transmit huge files over the internet, so that's a bad one. If you want to send somebody an MP3 as a reference mix, that's one thing. But if you're going to track to something, send them the full audio file.
And I'll take a step back on this, because the way I actually met George, who we've mentioned on this podcast before, George Leger III, he and I met through a beta testing situation of beta testing a network called the Rocket Network.
I remember that.
Yes. And the interesting thing about the Rocket Network is it allowed you to work as long as you were both using the same DAW. You couldn't use two different DAWs. So the Rocket Network had a situation for Pro Tools users. It had a situation for Cubase users and Logic users and Digital Performer users. But you couldn't go cross DAW with it. But the way that it worked was that you could set, as long as you both had the Rocket Network set up and the appropriate template for your DAW, you could record on your end and it would show up on the other user's end. Now, you could set the sample rate and you do all that kind of thing. And it would automatically populate the tracks on the other end by uploading the tracks that were just recorded and downloading them to the other user and popping them in. Generally, for speed purposes, you worked with MP3s. And this is, of course, before everybody knew all the timing problems and everything that really kind of happened. But as you were like finalizing stuff, you could then tell the server, tonight, when I shut you down, so to speak, you're going to upload all of the wave quality files to the other person, and they're going to download them. And you could do it overnight because things were much slower back then. So you would do it overnight when you weren't really working on the session. And that was an interesting way to work. Would I do it that way now? Not exactly. But if somebody came back with the Rocket Network at better than MP3 rates now, that would be pretty awesome. I think. Yeah. That's just me.
And I mean, but we're
getting off the track from sample rates, but thinking about sample rates and MP3s and all that.
Right. But there are services that are sort of dipping their toes into that, and one of them we're kind of using right now.
Yes, but it's not really transferring files automatically the way the Rocket Network did, which was much. No. Yeah, it was taking an additional step out.
Yeah, and I think the only problem with the Rocket Network was that I think it was just too ahead of its time. It's like people didn't have fast enough internet connections and stuff. Because I think most people at that point still had like dial-up modems.
Yeah. No, you're transferring files over like 33.6K baud modems. I mean, it was ridiculous. So that's why you were transferring MP3 files, because at the time, you were even transferring them at, I think, MP3s at maybe 96K. Now the standard is pretty much 320, but you were using
not 96K, but like 96 whatever.
Mbps or something. Yeah, it was much smaller MP3 size, and so it was workable, but it wasn't ideal. And I agree with you. I think it was way ahead of its time. In fact, it's something that could come back now, and it might actually do all right, especially in the terms of a pandemic. So, but you're right. Mixing sample rates within a single thing is not a great idea. Although there is one DAW that is now currently doing away with that. In a sense that you can get away with it. Not that it makes it a good thing to do, because it's bad in workflow practice. But there is a DAW that actually is making it so that that's not as much of an issue.
Less of an issue?
Yes. Yeah. That DAW would be Luna by Universal Audio. You can switch sample rates for that DAW, and it just doesn't even bat an eye. Doesn't care. I don't know why. I don't know how, but it doesn't care. Now, that doesn't mean that you go and start recording at 48K and then you bring in a file that's done at 44.1 or 96. I haven't actually tested the theory of what it's like to actually mix sample rates between tracks within a single session in Luna, although now that gives me an impetus to try that out just to see what happens.
No, but I think again, as a hard, fast rule, whether it becomes possible and an everyday thing down the line, that's sort of like,
that's when workflow will change. But for now, it's a bad idea.
Yeah, and it's. I would still argue that it's a bad idea. I would still, if you're recording at a certain sample rate, stay there.
There's another thing, though, that if you are a mix engineer or actually technically a recording engineer or producer who is attempting to get the quote unquote high res graphic that would go on your exports, your outputs, your final product that you would then stick on, if you were going to stick it on vinyl or on CD or whatever, or have it for something on your packaging, because there is from the Recording Academy, I think it is, a high-res definition that you can get, but you have to adhere to very strict guidelines in doing that. And that's where I see working with Luna, if it allows you to pull all kinds of ridiculous sample rates into it and it just doesn't bat an eye, becoming a problem, because now you're not adhering to it and you may not even realize you're not
be aware of it. Yeah.
So for workflow purposes and trying to get your mastered for iTunes or mastered for Apple Music denominations and your high-res file audio certifications, you need to be very aware of what you're working at, what sample rate you're doing, that kind of thing, because one cog in the step means you are lying when you put that on the packaging. And if you get caught somehow, not that you would, it would be not good for you.
The sample rate police will
come and get you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So stick to that. Now, the last point I would like to, bring up here on this topic is that now somebody's going to think, okay, well, I'll just record in 44.1 and not tax my system. And then I'm going to output it to 96 before I give it to the mastering engineer.
Yes. And as I thought earlier, what exactly is upmising? Just to go, just kidding.
Exactly. Yeah. So but there's no benefit of doing that. You're not adding any additional information. It's still not going to have a better quality of a file. You're not adding information to there. You might be outputting a 96. So there's no benefit of doing that. You're not hacking anything. You're not coming up with a way to break the system. It's not going to sound better than a 44.1 that you recorded it at. So pick your sample rate, stick with it. But
the terminology that we skipped over, because I was making a joke of the note that you had made calling it upmising. It's actually, it's called upsampling or upsizing the sample file or the sample rate of the file that you are exporting when you talk about going from 44.1K to some other higher sample rate as an output. So let's kind of maybe delve into just a brief little reasoning of why it doesn't work, because what you're doing is you think you're adding something to the file by upsizing it and doing that. But what you're doing is you're taking a lower quality file and adding more information of zero, absolutely nada, is essentially what you're doing. So it doesn't behoove you to do it because it does not actually improve the quality of the sound.
Yeah.
Right?
Very well put. Yep.
Yeah, you don't want to upsample for any purposes of that, mainly because it doesn't improve the quality of the sound. Now, when you are recording at much higher sample rates, say you do record at 88.2 or 96K or anything beyond that, generally speaking, you do have to downsample that for your final product. But downsampling is technically removing some of the audio information in order to get you to the appropriate sample rate that you need to get to. But when you are upsampling, as Chris just mentioned, you are adding literally nothing. It does not make it better. It just makes the file size bigger, which is no benefit to anyone. So we recommend don't do that. Just stop. Stop right there.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So and with that, we're wrapping a bow on that section, and we're going to say it's time for Friday Finds. Chris, we start with you. So what are you doing?
I saw this thing made my pants fit funny. But SSL came out with a new dock controller.
Oh boy.
Week. And oh my God, that thing looks sexy. The UF8, and I would love to get my hands on one of those. I've contemplated control surfaces because I imagine myself really, really liking that workflow.
Yes.
But nothing has sort of like fit my ideal of what I think that would like. But that one looks really, really cool.
I'm going to agree with you because you showed it to me immediately upon finding it, and I'm like,
right?
Yes.
Yeah. No, it couldn't have been anything else but that for me for this Friday.
Can I add a little like cherry on top of your cream soda of you? And it's called the UF8, by the way, just in case somebody missed that for what you were saying.
Right. So UF8. Yep.
The UF8. It does actually come with 2 of SSL's native plugins as well when you buy it.
Cool.
Just so you know.
Bonus.
Yes.
Yeah. So, what do you got for us, Jody?
This week, you just gave me, oh man, I just had a brain fart. Oh.
I stumped you.
Oh, you know what? I'm going to drop a hint. I'm going to drop an upcoming hint for our listeners. And I'm going to go with the Platinum by Fishman.
Oh, yeah.
The DI box that Fishman puts out that allows you to do some pretty nifty things when it comes to DI recording. And since last week we were talking about DI recording practices for your guitars, I figure that it's a good time to drop a little hint. Hint, hint, hint. Pay attention in the next couple of weeks, people. The Fishman Platinum is my choice for this week. That's what I'm going with. And it's a pretty nifty box. It allows you to do all kinds of things, and it's really great for your DI recording purposes.
Yep. Let's just say that there's more to come.
There's more to come. Keep listening in the next couple of weeks, and you might have pants that fit funny like Chris. While we've got your attention, I'd like you to go to our website, which is insidetherecordingstudio.com. And you can also leave us a review at insidetherecordingstudio.com/reviews. And we would really appreciate it if you're one of our Apple podcast listeners. If you do that, that's the only one that we know of right now that actually allows you to leave reviews. And hell, even if you're not an Apple podcast user, go do it anyway. Just to help us out. In terms of all of that, in addition to that, you can sign up to our email list at insidetherecordingstudio.com/gift. Actually, it doesn't matter if you go to the gift / but anywhere you sign up for our email list, you get a lovely little gift from Chris and I, which is some presets for Slate digital plugins and some Universal Audio plugins. And in addition to that, if you send us an email at goldstar@insidetherecordingstudio.com, and that's GOLDSTAR at insidetherecordingstudio.com with the word sample rate somewhere in that email, you might just get something cool back in your inbox. In addition to that, if you have a topic of suggestion that you would like Chris and I to expound upon or expose or talk about, anyway, this is the easiest way to say it, maybe, just drop us a line at the contact page on insidetherecordingstudio.com, and we will put it into rotation for consideration to make it an episode for you lovely people.
All right, Jody.
So with that, let's wrap a bow on it and say sayonara until next week. See ya.
See ya.